The following is a presentation of Voyescape Media. You can find all of our travel podcasts from around the world at voyescape.com.
Welcome to this week's episode of Travel in 10, where we're traveling down to South America to Buenos Aires, Argentina. Tim, tell me a little bit about your travels to Buenos Aires, when you've been there and how that's come about.
Well, I love Buenos Aires, and it's been interesting, the path that has taken me to Buenos Aires most of the times, which is because I love doing polar cruising. I do a lot of polar cruises, and I've been 6 times to Antarctica. And most of the time when you go to Antarctica, you fly first to Buenos Aires, maybe you spend a night or two there, and then you go down to Ushuaia and you get on your ship and you go to Antarctica. So I've gotten in the habit of, if I'm going to have a little bit of a stop in Buenos Aires a night, rather than doing one night, I'll do a week, or I'll do 3 or 4 nights, and have had opportunities to experience the city that way. I was just there about 3 weeks ago. I'm in this interesting cycle where I was there about 3 weeks ago on my way back from Antarctica. We'll be going on a Chilean fjords cruise in a week's time. And again, that goes through Buenos Aires. And so I'm going down a few days early just to enjoy the city. And then I'm doing actually a family trip with my sister's family in May, and we are doing Argentina. So I'll be back in Buenos Aires. So 3 this year, if all goes as planned, it'll be 3 times in Antarctica in about 4 months, or in Argentina and Buenos Aires in about 4 months. And so lots and lots of Buenos Aires, but I love the city. So that's all good with me. And I know that you have a bit of a story about the trip that brought you to Argentina and to Buenos Aires. So tell me about that.
Well, we did end up there a bit unexpectedly. We had, like, it was a family trip we had planned, where we were actually planning to go to Santiago, Chile, and then we had an amazing, really over the top itinerary plan for about probably 15 days or so in Chile, from Patagonia up to the Atacama Desert and sort of every corner of Chile that we'd planned to explore. About 3 or 4 weeks before our trip, all kinds of instability in the government in Chile, riots in the streets. The government of Canada and every other government around the world was recommending not to travel there at the time, but we had these flights that we couldn't cancel, couldn't really do anything with. So I managed about 5 days before our trip to rebook our entire trip on basically everything we planned to do, but on the Argentina side of the border. So instead of going to Santiago, we still had to touch down in Santiago. We spent 1 night there at an airport hotel. The roads were blockaded with like flaming barricades. There was tear gas on the streets, even in the 1 night we were there. But we got out, we got into Buenos Aires, and then continued down to Patagonia from there, and back up to Buenos Aires again. And it was amazing. We loved Argentina. Such a friendly culture, friendly people, amazing food. And in spite of, Chile and Argentina, both, in spite of, what happened the week we were there, are generally really stable, safe countries in South America as well. So
very much so.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear your kids tell that story. What an amazing experience. Obviously political instability is never a good thing, and it's not, but the life experience that they gained by being in that situation, and having to change things up on the fly and all that kind of stuff. I think that's a great story. Anyway, yeah.
So, what would you recommend? What are your sort of top things to do when somebody touches down in Buenos Aires?
For sure, just walking around Recoleta is worth it. It's probably the poshest, or one of the poshest neighborhoods in Buenos Aires. It's right in the heart of the city. And it's, beautiful tree-lined streets, some of the best restaurants in the city. And then, a must-do is, visiting the grave of Eva Perón, who was the in the musical Evita, and famously, Madonna played the part, and I think in the film, and so that's a big political chapter in the history of Argentina. And so going to that cemetery, it's one of these kind of cool cemeteries, like in New Orleans, where all the graves are, a lot of the graves are above the ground, and so that Recoleta is pretty cool. What about you? What's some of your favorite places to go in the city?
we really like just the whole vibe in La Boca is like it's definitely an area that you have to be a little bit more careful, I would say, in terms of traveling into, and more somewhere you'd want to go during the day than in the evenings.
Yeah, definitely daylight hours. Yeah,
definitely daylight hours. But there is so much. It's such a vibrant place, right? From the people out tango dancing in the streets and the music and the markets, and it's got a lot going on from a cultural perspective. It's definitely worth the trip.
Absolutely. A couple weeks, 2-3 weeks ago when I was down there, went with a couple friends to La Boca, and it was hot. I mean, it was heat wave. It was like 40 degrees Celsius, 100% humidity. And we found just this kind of shady spot. We got some Argentinian beer and we sat down, and they were doing a little, there was a singer, and then there was a couple tango dancers, and we just sat there for like an hour. It was great to just let the culture come to you. So that's, you get a lot of that in La Boca. It was great.
And then the other thing we really enjoyed, I mean, being we were kind of planning our trip on the fly, we saw an opportunity to add one more country to our trip, and did a day side trip. It actually ended up being a 2-day trip, an overnight to Colonia in Uruguay that you can easily do as a ferry ride out of Buenos Aires, and this great historical city, very cool side trip that if somebody's got more than 3 or 4 days in Buenos Aires and has the time to do it, I would highly recommend as well.
Absolutely. And I did one of my trips to Buenos Aires, I also did that. You can do a ferry a little bit further and go, I think it's about 3 hours on the ferry, and go all the way to Montevideo, and the capital of Uruguay. And it's a little bit more of an effort. You're probably not going to do it as a day trip. But there is a fast ferry that goes to Montevideo, and so you can kind of do there's beaches, and it's right on the River Plate, like Buenos Aires is, and I think that it's so interesting whether you go to Colonia or Montevideo, that you have these two countries side by side. They're very similar culturally, but they have their nuances, and the people are a little bit different, and the food's a little bit different, and so it's especially going to Colonia because it's right there. It's a great way to get a take on two different cultures in a single day. So completely agree.
Now, I know one of the things that Argentina in general is really known for, but Buenos Aires in particular, is for their amazing steak places. Mm-hmm. And it seems like everybody who you speak to in Buenos Aires has a different favorite. And me and you, I think, have two different favorites. What was your favorite spot to go for steak in town?
For sure, Don Julio, great steakhouse in this fantastic neighborhood. I believe it's in Palermo, Hollywood. And right on the corner, great ambiance. I think it's been named the best steakhouse in Latin America, the best steakhouse in the world, something like that. And I did a trip there once and had dinner there once. And the son of the owners came out and introduced himself. And I was writing an article, and he was aware of that, and took me and said, just come follow me. I'm going to show you something. And we walked like a block away across the square. It's right on this great little square. And we walked across the square, and he opened up the door to a house. And I thought, what is happening? Like, where are we going? And the house was filled with beef. And they had taken a house and then retrofitted it to be a place where they dry age their beef. And there were just these huge, sides of beef just hanging up in this house. And he said, this is how we dry age our steaks. So fantastic meal, great ambiance. And they dry age their steaks, as I saw firsthand. So Don Julio is my favorite, but I know you've got your favorite. And so, yeah, tell me about that.
Don Julio was amazing. I would highly recommend Don Julio as well. You can't go wrong there. But as I said, everybody we talked to had a passionate opinion on the best steakhouse in town, and one that our Uber driver insisted on taking us to, and was phenomenal. It was a place called Fervor, which it was one of the best meals we've ever had. It was really inexpensive. I mean, I think for a family of 4, we paid certainly under $100, might even been under $50 for all of us, with wine, with steak, with everything. Although the other thing I will say about Argentina is the prices do fluctuate wildly up and down, just because of the economy there, and so that is something to be aware of. And the other thing, I don't know if you found this, but we found. Well, I'll tell another story about this in a minute, but getting money was a big challenge. Like a lot of ATMs would give had very low withdrawal limits. You could only take out the equivalent of about $50 US at a time, and you were being charged quite a bit each time you took out money.
Yeah.
Did you have any troubles with that when you were there?
Yeah, so that's changed just recently. And, it was funny because going in this time, I didn't really know what the deal was because the situation you've described is exactly what I've encountered in the past. What they've done now, and it might be different by the time I go in a week's time, who knows? But what had happened was they had, I believe, they devalued the currency. And so it had gotten the inflation a little bit under control, but there were basically like 3 different exchange rates, depending if you were paying cash, if you were paying with a domestic credit card or an international credit card. So at the moment, Argentina is actually a really good deal because if you pay with an international credit card, the exchange rate you get is about 3 times better than the official rate. So that's what was happening. So talking about, walking out for under $50, that was definitely the experience that I had on this last visit, but who knows what's going to happen in the future. But it is, at the moment, it is a very good deal for international travelers. I know it's probably difficult economically for people of Argentina, but yeah. So, but I remember the days of the blue market where you would take as much cash as you could and exchange it, and then you would get a much better exchange rate on cash versus card. And
did you find most places would take credit cards when you were there?
Yes, it depends. I mean, yes, most places. Even that little place we went and got beer in La Boca, they took a credit card, and so it's for sure taxis, the regular taxis are not going to take credit cards. Street food type places are not going to take credit cards. But most of the places that I visited on this last trip did take credit cards, and it was a pretty easy transaction. Yeah.
I remember just talking about money and cash. One experience we had when we were there is we were taking a cab one day, and it was a restaurant in some kind of obscure part of town that we'd read of that was supposed to be great, but he was warning us that it wasn't the best part of town, and we should really, be a bit cautious going there, and we really wanted to know if we wanted to be dropped off there. And I kept insisting, hey, like, we've traveled around the world a lot, we're fine, we've researched this place, we'll be good, but thank you, we're savvy travelers, don't worry about it. And then I went to pay him, and I pulled out what I thought was a 500 note, and noticed, and he like threw it back at me, and I noticed it was because somebody had taken a Sharpie marker and just put the 2 zeros on a 5 note to 500, and I hadn't realized when I didn't get it earlier in the day. So,
I love that. Yeah, you can't fool us. You
can't fool us. Yeah.
Here's a 5. That's worth half a cent. Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Any final tips, hidden treasures?
Well, yeah.
For you?
So I don't know about where is your favorite place to stay in Buenos Aires? Did you have a go-to place?
Well, we were staying on point, so we stayed at the Sheraton Buenos Aires, which is a great location. It's right across the main train station. It was very close to where you got the ferry across to Colonia as well. And there was a lot. What I really liked about it, just a lot of great restaurants, bars that were within walking distance. Quite a cool sort of riverfront district that you could easily walk to from the hotel. So good central location, the high standard, up to Marriott Sheraton standards around the world for sure.
Sure, it's a great hotel. I've stayed there as well, and my favorite is the Park Hyatt Palacio do How. For me, this is actually one of the best hotels in the world. Like, it really is. It was built into a former aristocratic palace. They've added a modern wing, and what separates the two are these gardens that have, these old trees, old growth trees. They've got fountains. They do brunch out there. And if you don't want to walk across the gardens, if it's raining or it's too hot, which it often is in Buenos Aires in the summer, there's an underground passageway that doubles as an art gallery. So as you walk through the passageway, they have, I think the people who own the hotel have one of the greatest private art collections in Argentina, and they display a little bit of that in the underground tunnel. So, it's even if you go for a meal, even if you're not staying there, it's really, really an amazing place right there in Recoleta.
For you to say one of your favorite hotels in the world, that's high praise. Like, this
it is. It's definitely top 5. It's just the history of it. The rooms are very nice, very comfortable. The location is perfect, and just the feel of it. It just to be able to, the restaurants were great. They serve excellent steaks. I had a great steak there, as you're often going to get in Argentina. I don't know. It just, for me, the service was excellent. Everything, it had everything. It had the history, it had the story, it had the culture, it had the art, it had, plus, a comfortable bed and a deep soaker bathtub and, good room service and all those other things you want. So yeah, so a very, 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 good Park Hyatt there in Buenos Aires.
Now, did you make too? One of the things that I am disappointed we missed, and it was just timing more than anything, that we couldn't find one that would align with timing there. We saw some of the sort of tango performances on the street, but we didn't go to one of the tango shows. Is it touristy and cheesy? Are they worth doing? What do you think?
Well, that's a great question, because that's actually for my, I always have a can't miss and a hidden treasure. For my can't miss, it really is a tango show. So it is for sure cheesy and touristy. I don't think a lot of people who live in Buenos Aires are going to these tango shows, but it is a great experience. I mean, the dancers are very talented. You get the history of the dance in Buenos Aires and how it developed in that area. And then most of these shows you have the option of doing it as a dinner show. And again, I'll never forget, I've probably done it 2 or 3 times. The steak, if you opt for the steak, it's really good steak. It's not rubber chicken like you might get at some other dinner show. It was just a really solid meal as well. Really, really good meal. So that's my must do. And then for my hidden treasure, this one's kind of a long story, so I'm just gonna allude to it. There are a lot of underground speakeasy cafes in Buenos Aires, and some of them are truly speakeasies. So there's one I went to in Recoleta where you go to a flower shop that looks completely like a normal flower shop. And then if you know the password, they open up the fridge, the actual refrigerator. Well, it's not a real refrigerator. You walk through it and you go down the stairs, and there's a whole upscale, beautiful chandeliers, backlit bar, this whole bar that's downstairs. There's probably 200 people in the bar, and it was truly, truly amazing. Some of them are a little bit more touristy. There's one that I went to where you go down the stairs and it looks like you're going into a New York subway. It says, Uptown in the Bronx. It looks exactly like you're going into a New York subway. And they actually have like a pretend New York subway that they've built down there. And then you walk through to the other side and you've got this nightclub. So these are kind of, you wouldn't necessarily know about them unless you knew about them. And there's a lot of them. So I definitely recommend checking those out.
Love that. Love a hidden bar. They're always very Instagrammable. Always a good highlight of the trip.
Exactly. Exactly. And most of the people you're going to meet there are like local people out for their Saturday night or whatever. And so you're going to have these kind of real experiences with people, which is great as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, for our next show, we're going to be going somewhere with a bunch of speakeasies and underground hidden bars. Is New York for our next episode coming up next week. But in the meantime, if people want to check out more on Buenos Aires, we're going to have our downloadable digital guide to Buenos Aires with our recommended itinerary, some of our top tips on what to see, where to go, and what to do available on our website. Thanks, Tim. Look forward to catching up next week.
Me too. Great to chat with you, David, and chat with you next week.
Sounds great.
You've been listening to a podcast from the Voyescape Podcast Network. You can find all of our podcasts from around the world at voyescape.com.